This is as bare bones as it's going to get, so let's get to it. This is Pac-Man for the Sega Game Gear. I don't need to discuss Pac-Man's history. We all know what Pac-Man is, and if you don't know what Pac-Man is, you're going to hell. So with that out of the way, let's look at Pac-Man for Game Gear, which supports both a zoomed-in scrolling view with full sprite resolution and a full screen mode with compressed graphics that can be accessed by pressing left or right on the directional pad on the title screen. Whichever way works, they both function rather well, and the zoomed-in viewpoint adds a slight degree of challenge, harkening back to the days of Junior Pac-Man, but otherwise it doesn't exactly cripple the game. The Game Gear version of Pac-Man is an interesting conversion of the arcade classic. It retains the same graphics, sounds, and gameplay mechanics that made Pac-Man a classic. The control of Game Gear version is rather solid, responsive, and it works without a hitch. Can't really complain. I think it takes a real stroke of genius to screw up controls in a Pac-Man video game. Not that it hasn't been tried before. Graphics in the full zoomed-in, full resolution mode almost seems on par with the NES version of Pac-Man, which was fairly close to matching the graphics of the arcade original, although this version does seem a bit more colorful. The maze takes up the full length of the screen with the score, lives count, and fruit indicators overlapping the playfield. As such, minor details like dots and ghosts might be hidden by this on-screen information, but considering this game only has one maze, I doubt this is a major issue. But you notice how the maze only scrolls up and down rather than all up, down, left, and right? That's because the Game Gear version manages more maze coverage on screen than the competing Game Boy version, or even the Neo Geo Pocket Color version that would be released years later. It's a minor detail, but one that's significant, and gives a bit of edge to the Game Gear release since it means no jarring shift in perspective when you go through the warp tunnel like on the Game Boy version. You see the entire horizontal base of the maze. It's a nice little detail that I don't think was ever replicated on another portable console until the Game Boy Advance version of Pac-Man Collection, which had the same similar thing, but yeah, I just thought I'd point that out. The full screen mode has far more compressed graphics, and Pac-Man himself looks a bit fuzzy here, as opposed to Ghost, which looks somewhat sharp, but everything looks like what it should, so it's hard to complain. Besides, you only notice the fuzzy part when you're playing it on an emulator. I doubt it's going to matter so much on an old Game Gear screen. Sound-wise, it's not fantastic sound, high-pitched at times, but does sound like Pac-Man's, and that's good enough for me, I suppose. All in all, Game Gear owners were served with a solid version of Pac-Man under a portable system of choice back in the day, and no doubt it plays pretty good on the Game Gear's D-pad. My feeling is you can never have enough Pac-Man, so if you have a Game Gear and can find a copy for a buck or two, then it's worth having in your collection. Compared to its timely contemporaries such as Game Boy or Neo Geo Pocket Color, it doesn't offer anything really special. Although the default view does cover more of the playfield than the other two versions, so it's somewhat more open, I guess. Pac-Man's not really worth tracking a Game Gear for, since Pac-Man is just about anywhere and everywhere these days, but this Game Gear port's just as good.